West African country of Burkina Faso has experienced since the country got its independence in the year 1960 has been termed impressive. Once the land of upright men in the time of Africa's icon Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso has reeled from one political regime to the next. Ever since the ouster of Blaise Compaoré, power grab has been at the center, sometimes by street movements and mostly by military groups. The same trend followed when democratically elected President Rochma Christian Kabore first took in office in 2015 and was later re-elected in 2020, was overthrown by a new coup with the support of Burkina Faso. Power then moved to Lieutenant Colonel Paul Harry Damiba, who took on January 24 with a promise to curb insecurity in the region. The tactical pattern has been repeated once again as on September 30, a new military leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, ousted the leader in place. Why is this persistent coup in the West African nation of Burkina Faso? Find out in today's edition of Voice It. Hello Africa and the world, thank you immensely for joining us on a fresh dose of Voice It over your Pan-African channel 4U Media, where if you're listening over 4U Radio, you're watching us on 4U Television. Today we are discussing the history of coup d'etats in the West African nation of Burkina Faso. And of course I will not be alone this afternoon. I'm equally joined by Dr. ASONG Kuma, who is a lawyer with the Rwandan Bar Association. Good day, sir.
Good day, Sharon, and good day to all our attendees.
It's a pleasure having you on this great platform once again. But before we proceed, getting down into the matter, let's try to understand what is happening in Burkina Faso and, of course, try to answer the question, if peace can one day return to the West African nation, as we listen to this report. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get down to understanding today's topic of discussion, we are going to proceed as we shall be taking a listen to this report, of course, that is compiled to us by the news desk of 4U Media.
September 30 military coup in Burkina Faso has left many tongues wagging within and beyond the African continent. The spokesman for Guinea's military government offered his perspective on the situation.
If we want to consider the transition in Burkina and only focus on principles by saying that coups are condemnable and that they must be limited in duration without providing solutions to the causes of the crisis, we take the risk that it occurs again. The Guinean authorities insist that it is important to question the context of each country in order to try to bring appropriate solutions to the problems these nations face. The issue of Burkina is not the same as that of Mali, much less as that of Guinea. Therefore, each country has its own specificities that must be taken into account.
Since 2015, the jihadist insurgency spread to Burkina Faso from neighboring Mali. Ousted Colonel Damiba took the reins of the country and promised to restore peace, but once more the insecurity persisted till his last minute in office.
The issue of security, territorial integrity and the fight against terrorism are issues that ultimately structure all the crises unfolding in Burkina, and we must provide answers to that. These answers can be supported, amplified, accompanied by the international community, by ECOWAS, to allow the Burkinabe people to return to a normal context.
As Burkinabe wait for a return to normal, 2 million are still internally displaced, when others are trapped in localities controlled by terrorists. The new coup leader, Ibrahim Traoré, argued soldiers lacked the basic logistics under Damiba. It remains to be seen if he shall turn around the crisis or he too shall be flushed out of office in another military coup as his predecessor.
Today we
September 30 military coup in Burkina Faso has left many tongues wagging within and beyond.
Today we are discussing coups in Burkina Faso. Of course, just to reiterate that this is the 9th military coup that has been taken place in the West African nation of Burkina Faso, and today we are understanding why does this keep coming up in the West African nation. As I earlier mentioned, I'm joined this afternoon by Dr. ASONG, who is, of course, a lawyer with the Rwandan Bar Association. So, sir, the first question I'll be asking you this afternoon is, having listened to that report, what is your overview of the military coups that have been taking place in Burkina Faso, given that it was a coup within a coup?
Thank you, Sharon, for having invited me. My take is this. You know, in Africa, we have serious issues with governance. And governance is simply defined as the manner in which a state is being ruled, organized, governed, or administered by certain entities. And we realize that in Africa today, there have been several types of governance. We have governance which has been put in place maybe by military leaders. We have democratic governance. We also have authoritative governance. And also, in the past, we had governance which were being linked to tradition, custom, or even religion. So we realize that the issue, the problem that is at stake in Burkina Faso is that the Burkina Faso people, or the Burkinabe, were not able to put in place a very good governance system that will actually secure all the 6 dimensions of governance. And when we talk about the 6 dimensions of governance, we talk about voice and accountability. We talk about political stability and lack of violence. We talk about government effectiveness. We talk about the regulation of laws. We talk about the rule of law. And finally, we also talk about the fight against corruption. So these are actually the 6 dimensions of governance. And when you look at what is happening in Burkina Faso, there are a few of these dimensions that have not been satisfied, and that is why we are having coup after coup. And we shall talk about, first of all, political stability. Political stability has never existed. As you earlier said, there has been coup to coup, and even before Sankara took power, it was still a coup. And of course, if we base our governance on military rule, on coup, then automatically that will be a serious problem. Moreover, we also have violence, and violence which is being linked to the jihadists. They say in quotes that they are from Mali, but I think that is not the problem. I think the issue here is that most African states have not been able to find grounds of negotiations with their brothers to actually bring in peace. And you know, when there is no peace in a particular region, or there is no unity between those or the population and the citizens of a particular region, automatically when there is a conflict, people begin to take different types of canopies. They will call themselves jihadis, they will call themselves Al-Qaeda. But when you want to go deeply, you realize that everybody in that group is having his or her own objectives. And that is why even when you look at the coup that just took place, you are surprised. The same Captain Traoré was part of the group of the former Colonel Damiba. So it's surprising that somebody who was with the former colonel and who actually assisted him in the former coup is now himself carrying out another coup on a coup which he was part of. So it therefore means that there is no unity amongst the Burkinabe people. And that is the main issue we are having in Africa. Because if we are not able to have unity, then automatically we'll easily have coups. Because when people don't agree, people think that they can use power or different methods to be able to express themselves, take over power, and rule. But the problem is conflicts have never resolved any problem in relation to governance. Moreover, they have instead led to more instability. You will realize that the instability in Mali has actually, in one way or the other, favorized the instability in Burkina Faso. And you know, the way African countries are being construed, you will realize that when there is instability in a particular African country, then it is very likely that it might actually affect other African states. So my take about this coup is that there is a serious problem of governance in Africa in general, because we have been having a lot of conflicts around, whether it be in East Africa or be it in North Africa or West Africa or Central Africa. There have been a lot of conflicts. And I think the way to go about it is not by war, but is to put in place a very good governance system that will satisfy all these different dimensions of governance, and at the end of the day, have a prosperous and a stable Africa.
Yeah, you did mention that this military coups that keep resurfacing because of bad governance in our various African countries. Now, of course, we just want to say that the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, and the African Union, both they condemned this military coup that took place in Burkina Faso on September 30. Now, according to the mediation team that was dispatched to Burkina Faso, they said they were satisfied because after speaking with the military group in place, or the military group in power as we speak, they were satisfied because they agreed to return the country back to civilian rule as was earlier agreed for July 2024. Now, in your opinion, do you actually think that this military power, this military government that is in place as we speak, are they actually going to return the country to civilian rule, given that was the same thing that was said under Damiba, but it did not actually take place because we had a resurface of another military coup?
Yeah, exactly. That is the problem with all the coups that have taken place. Most of the time, Africans are so hungry of power that when they take over, what they always try to do is to stay in power. And that's something I've never really understood, why Africans are so much tied to power. It means that immediately somebody takes power, what he does is to make sure he stays in power. Now, the problem, the main issue here is that those who are being, who are master planners of these coups and who actually succeed in these coups are not actually prepared. Governance is not something that you get up one day and the next day you think that you'll be able to manage things and do things well. And that is the problem why we are having a lot of conflicts in Africa. Because even those who are taking power are not competent enough to manage the issues. Like you take, for example, when Damiba took power, he said, his aim is to stop violence. So there is an issue of national security.
Violence and insecurity.
Also, yes, and insecurity. Now, Traoré is also saying the same thing, that there is an issue of national security. So it's quite strange, because if military leaders, you have successive military leaders who have come into power and they have not been able to resolve the issue, that how can we trust the new military leader in the sense that he's going to be able to resolve this issue? And that is where the problem is, because Captain Traoré, I'm not sure he ever knew one day that he's going to be president. So he's not prepared, of course, to govern. He thinks that taking power is something easy and governing is something easy, but it's quite difficult. And I will say that the method which he wants to use to resolve the problem at stake will not help us in any way. Because even in the UN Charter, there is a principle where you have to trade justice for peace. So we have to get to the point where we should be able to listen to our African brothers and sisters. They remain our brothers, they remain our sisters, and we are of the same blood, and we can't be fighting amongst ourselves. So I think there should be some sort of comprehensive approach towards this problem, and that they should sit with the jihadists and discuss and know why they are carrying out the attacks. And there might be reasons for that which are legitimate. And at the end of the day, by sitting on the negotiating table, it will be easy to resolve. But now, when we have now a military leader who says that he's going to hand over power in 2014, then there is a problem.
2024,
this
you
is
mean?
a clear, sorry, thank you, 2024. It therefore means that there is a clear violation of the Constitution. So, if there is no rule of law, then what is governance? governance is meaningless, because one of the 6 dimensions of governance is the rule of law. It therefore means that all the leaders are supposed to work according to the constitution, which is the main law of the land. So if he says that he's going to hand over power in 2024,
actually he hasn't. Yeah, Dr. ASONG, he hasn't yet been proclaimed the president of Burkina Faso, like was the case with Damiba. I think that is supposed to take place in 3 months from now. So we are waiting to see if he is proclaimed, because the time frame was given by the Economic Community of West African States, July 2024, which they are supposed to respect.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Why should we be going or giving the time limit right up to 2024? Whereas most of our constitutions say that when there is a vacancy at the presidency, either the president of the Senate, or I don't know, the vice president is going to take over power and is going to organize elections in the next 2 months. So what are we talking about if we have to give a time limit right up to 2024?
Time can answer the question.
It's not supposed to go up to 2024. We have to work by the constitution. The constitution says that if there is vacancy, automatically elections have to be organized, and there is a clean and clear-cut procedure for that. But you will realize that all these leaders who come into power don't want to respect the rule of law, and that is the foundation of governance. And let me tell you, as long as the rule of law will not be respected, we'll always have issues. No matter how good a president is, no matter how perfect a president is, if he does not respect the rule of law, then conflicts will come back. They will return. Look at the case of Thomas Sankara, who was president. So he did not even organize a coup. It's his friend Blaise Compaoré that organized the coup and took over, and he took over as president. But what did he do? Did he do his best to put in place the rule of law? Did he do his best to put in place a good governance system? Did he do his best to be able to bring all his brothers together, to unite them, to understand them? And at the end of the day, what did we have? He too was ousted by the same Blaise Compaoré that put him in power. So what I'm simply trying to say is that the issue we are having in Africa is that most of our leaders don't want to respect the rule of law. The rule of law is the basis of everything in a society. And without the rule of law, the society automatically will become a jungle, and everybody will want to do what he wants. Everybody will feel that he's competent. Everybody will feel that he can carry out duties the way he wants. Whereas they say that power belongs to the people. The sovereignty of a nation belongs to the people and is just exercised by the president. So I think the military leaders should actually, or Captain Traoré should actually go back to the rule of law, to follow the constitution and to organize elections in the nearest time possible. That is the only way Burkina Faso will be able to preserve peace and political stability. Because we just heard of recent again that the group of Damiba are saying that they are going to attack.
Yes.
You see, so when it becomes something that even those in the military are not united, then automatically we are going to see more and more coups. But if Captain Traoré is wise enough, he should work according to the constitution and immediately transfer power to the people, to the civilians. If he does that, automatically the other military group who are against him will see no need to be against him, because he will no more be a target any longer, because he has shifted from power and he has given the power to the population. So it means that the other group will have to fight against the population, and that is something impossible. So that is the problem. So you see, that is really unfortunate about African leadership, and they don't want to respect the rule of law. It's so bad.
Yeah, you did reiterate, or you said that the captain in place, his reasons are not justified, given he says he wants to fight insecurity, which was what was said by his predecessor. Now, several sources have said, revealed that the Burkina Faso population now are turning towards the fight against insecurity, they're turning towards Russia. So, given the recent fallout between the West African country and the former colonial masters France, given this fight against insecurity, what would be your take on the recent development that's unfolding in the country?
Yeah, actually, for me, I find the Burkina Faso people immature. I'm sorry to say that, because actually, what youths and Africans are looking for today is political independence, is economic independence, is military independence. And if they are ousting out France to go for Russia, then
this is in the fight against insecurity. This is in the fight
no,
against
I understand. I'm coming.
Okay.
I'm coming. So, if they are seeking for France, then for Russia, then automatically there is a problem, because you're just living from one master to the other. Now, what we have always thought is that fighting insecurity, we must go by violence, we must go by force. But what I'm trying to say here is that the approach has to change. We need a more comprehensive approach. So what do I mean by comprehensive approach? It's an approach that is being based on a change of our mindsets. So you won't see Americans today having a war against themselves, or like, even if they have conflicts, but they always come together in unity. So they disagree to agree. It's only in Africa that you see groups disagreeing to fight wars. So that is what I'm trying to say, that there is an issue. Fighting insecurity must not be by the means of violence or using weapons. There are many other ways we can fight insecurity in Africa, and not by the use of weapons. Because when our African countries turn to the West or to Russia or to China, it's because they need heavy artillery to be able to combat the jihadists or the rebels.
Yes.
But history, experience, and past events have shown that no matter the capacity, no matter the quality of artillery weapons that you can have, quenching a terrorist attack is above that. We see what happened in Afghanistan. America was there for 30 years, and later on the Taliban took over, and they are causing a whole mess up there, violating women's rights and all the like. You see? So using weapons or getting weapons from the West or Russia is not a certainty that they will be able to resolve conflict and instability in the region. And that is why I'm saying that, for me, I don't really see why we should be going towards them to get more weapons to fight our own brothers, to kill ourselves. And you know, when there is a conflict, the conflict moves from generation to generation. People join wars, sometimes you ask them, they will not even tell you what they are fighting for. They might just be fighting for because you hurt their uncle, or you killed their father, or you killed somebody close to them. So what I'm trying to say is that the approach is not, or should not be, an approach of war. The approach should be one of reconciliation, should be one of negotiation, should be one of peace conventions, so that we understand each other and we live together. So that is why when you talk about your question about insecurity, I don't see the need of Russia, I don't see the need of the West, France, and all those countries. I just think that we Africans should always be reminded that according to the UN Charter, we have been granted sovereignty, we have been granted independence, political, economic, military independence, and we have been granted that capacity to be able to take care of our own affairs. But the problem is, if each time we show immaturity, if each time we show that we cannot resolve our own issues, we cannot sit together, talk together, and be united, then automatically the West is going to take advantage. And they are making a lot of money out of it. That's what we have to understand, because no country in international relations helps another for free. If Russia is helping you with weapons or artillery, they are going to look for a way to get it back, and they'll get it back through their through your natural resources, and the same with the West and France. You see, so that should not be the way to go about it. If we want to preserve our economy, want to actually ensure political stability, we have to make sure that we resolve our own issues. Look at what Russia is doing. Because Ukraine disobeyed, they attacked Ukraine. So it therefore means that the day Mali or Burkina Faso is, if in case they get partnership with Russia, disobey Russia, it means that Russia is going to attack them. Because easy. They can even,
we can't
they can
really
even
tell
bring a bomb from Russia to Mali or
we
Burkina
can't really,
Faso.
we can ascertain for now. We can ascertain, that's a future quote, so to say. But there's this popular, there is this popular African saying that we had the solutions to our problems. Now, may one not be tempted to say that this is actually ironical when it comes to Burkina Faso, given that what is happening, it's not like someone is a foreign leader is coming to cause instability in the country, but it's someone from the country that is actually popping up. So how do you analyze this whole situation?
Yeah, actually, this is a serious problem, and for me, I've always said everywhere we have to talk about African issues and conflicts, that Africans are their own problems. So you will always realize that in Africa, most of our issues are caused by ourselves, because we are greedy, because we are not united, because we want to keep power for ourselves, for our family members, or for our different villages and tribes, our communities. And that is where the issue is, because each time a leader does that, automatically you create enemies the other way. And at that point, conflicts will always pop up, and we will not be able to find stability. So it's rather unfortunate, and that is why I said earlier on that we need a comprehensive approach. We have to change our mindset. We have to see ourselves as Africans. We have to see ourselves as one. We have to see ourselves as brothers and sisters. And from there, it will be easier for us to be united, to work in solidarity for the development of Africa.
Just to proceed, religious and traditional leaders in the West African country actually said Lieutenant Colonel Damibat tabled his resignation under 7 conditions, which was to guarantee his safety, those of his supporters, restore the country or return the country to civilian rule, just to cite this few. Now, how would you analyze this, given that it's traditional rulers and, of course, religious rulers that are supposed to come forth and say that a leader, someone who once ruled the country, although it was for 8 months, has tabled his resignation? Why wasn't it done publicly?
Well, actually, what we have to understand is that when there is a coup, of course, it's an aggressive or violent way to take power, and automatically, if you take power through a coup, it means that you are not agreeing with the other person. You have not come to terms with the other person. You have taken it by force without his consent. So automatically, there will be a conflict. There will be disagreements, you see, between the two parties. So I was really happy when I heard that the religious community had to actually play a mediation role in asking the former president or colonel to actually resign and to secure his safety and move out of the country. I think that was a very good move, because, as I said, it comes back to what I'm saying. In resolving disputes, we always need a comprehensive approach. The manner to go about it is not war, you understand? Because had it been the religious leaders did not come into the scene, might be Damimba would have taken other measures to fight back, you understand? But I'm sure when the religious leaders came into play, they were able to table him down and explain to him that there is no need to have more people die. You understand? Captain Traore has already taken power. So the best thing, for the best interest of the Burkinabe, you understand, and for the country, it's better for him to go out of the country and just let things to be done by Traoré. So that was a very comprehensive approach to the issue, and I'm really glad that the religious groups were able to make him actually mediate and move out of the country. So that is what I'm talking about. And I think that the religious group also can also play the same role in telling Captain Traoré that he should not stay long there. He should not even make more than 3 months there. He should follow the rule of law, respect the constitution, and hand over power to the people. There are so many competent people in Burkina Faso that, of course, will be able to resolve all these issues. And I said the best way is not violence, because military people, the military or soldiers always think that the best way to go about it is guns. But we have seen the failure of so many armies all over the world, even superpowers, in places that nobody could even imagine. So it's just to say that the way about it is not through violence. The way about it is through peace negotiations, and that the religious communities and even the civil society and other institutions should be able to play the same role, so that there should be no war. These religious societies could do the same thing with the jihadist group in the north. They could actually act as mediators, so that there should be peace, knowing fully well that the ideology behind some jihadist groups is about the holy war. So they can also mediate and bring peace and stability in the country, instead of going through wars, which, as I earlier said, has never resolved any issue and has never brought peace and stability to the country.
Yes, just in line with what you said religious rulers, the religious community do have a very significant role to play when it comes to resolving conflict, not just in Burkina Faso, but in other African countries. Now, I would like to ask you this question. Do you think some coups can actually lead to peace in certain parts of Africa?
For me, it's impossible. No coup will ever lead to peace and stability in a country. Okay. And the reason is simple. It is because coups are in violation of the constitution.
Yes.
The constitution in itself is not just only a law that we have on text. We have to know that constitutions and the law in general are being inspired by written law is being inspired by what we call the natural law. And natural law is the law that is being originated from maybe religion, maybe tradition, maybe customs. So we have to know that the constitution has a greater power. It's not just written words, but through those words, so many things are being revealed or are being demonstrated in the constitution. So there are religious views in the constitution. There are so many things in the constitution. So that is why it must be respected. And if you realize, each time there has been a coup, automatically, even if the leaders in questions are still in power, you will realize that there is always some sort of national insecurity. So for me, taking all the examples we have in Africa, no matter the example you're going to cite, you always realize that there is some sort of insecurity. So coups will never resolve the issue of Africa. We have to respect the law, and the law is not only what is written, but the law actually represents religious ideologies, traditional ideologies, customs, and the rest. And it must be respected because it's the main law of the law of the land. So immediately we violate it, then we are calling for trouble. And that is why I said earlier on that Captain Traoré should work according to the rule of law, because that is one of the most important dimensions of governance, and that he should work according to the constitution and hand over power back to the people. If he does that, he will be saving a generation of Burkinabés, because as we see, as you earlier said, that there have been 9 coups in Burkina Faso. It's not normal. It makes no sense. And Burkina Faso means the land of the incorruptible. So if people are incorruptible, but you keep on having issues, so it makes no sense.
Yes.
So I think they have to change that. They have to change their approach and try to seek national unity negotiations, and they should not use weapon or artillery as a means of resolution of disputes.
Peace, unity, and of course putting the people first. Just to proceed, we want to recall that in 2014 there were protests given the military coup that took place on September 30. Since then, there have been demonstrations upon demonstrations for one reason or the next. And we just want to recall in 2014 there was a protest that saw the ouster of the former president Blaise Compaoré, who ruled the country for 27 years. He stayed for 27 years in power. Do you think that given these current protesters or demonstrations that keep taking place in Burkina Faso, as we have been seeing in these days now, do you think that Burkina Faso is headed back in the same direction as was in 2014?
Well, I think it's just a repetition of things, of events. You know, nothing is new under the sun, and when an event takes place, or a particular incident takes place, if it is not resolved perfectly well, of course it's going to reoccur. And that is why I said from the very start that the problem and the issue is governance. As long as governance is not being put in place in its perfection, respecting all the dimensions I listed earlier, automatically we are going to have sequence of conflicts, violence, and incidents that would always come back. So we are coming back to the same issue that happened in 2014 because those in power did not take upon themselves to put in place a sustainable governance system. And that is why I said that is the problem with Africa. As long as the governance system will not be sustainable, then we will always be exposed to more conflict. So we have to learn from these things. We have to actually use all these situations as examples so that in future we will not repeat them, and that will always make sure that we put in place a good governance system that will actually favor the population, bring in accountability, bring in political stability without violence, government effectiveness, the rule of law, and fight corruption. So all those things will be put in place. And when you do that, bringing in also national unity, when you do that, of course, handing power to the population, putting the population first, then you obviously realize that the population will have nothing to complain about. A population that goes on strike is a population that is not we don't want, because Mali is already almost in the same type of situation, and if you have Burkina Faso too, then this is just to bring instability in West Africa, and it might go down to maybe Central Africa, and it's a lot for Africa. It's a lot for Africa because it's businesses that are being interrupted. It is education, it is health, it is the rights of women, of children that are being violated every day, because those are the most vulnerable groups, and when there is a war, they are those who are most affected. So we have to stop all of this, and that I think that the West African bloc, regional bloc, has to actually advise these leaders, and that they are supposed to follow what they are saying and follow the rule of law. That's a great role to play. So I don't see why African nations should always be looking out, whereas we can have the solution here in Africa through the African Union that is uniting all the African states. What we don't have, we can get from the other African states, considering the fact that we are one people, we have one history, we have gone through a lot, and we have one blood. So for me, I think that is how things should be done. Governance systems should be well established with good institutions for accountability, for control, for social justice, and in that way the population will not get angry.
Exactly. Good governance is very important, like you earlier said. It's very important when it comes to making or solidifying each and every community. Now, you cited the fact that the economic community of West African states, the regional bloc, though has a very important role to play when it comes to managing or better regularizing these various member states. Like most most of the military coups we have seen so far, since in 2 years, have been recorded in West Africa. Now, what role, how can the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, reduce the resurgence of military coups in the region?
Well, that's a very difficult task that is being attributed to the ECOWAS, and not only the ECOWAS, but even the African Union and the United Nations organization. So it's a very difficult task, because you realize that despite the fact that countries are being members of a regional bloc or a continental bloc or a worldwide bloc, does not actually impose conventions and regulations upon them. And that is why you realize that even in the UN, countries need to ratify conventions, countries need to be signatories, need to domesticate. You see, so there are a lot of proposals that are being made. So when you have a situation where those who are taking power don't want to respect the rule of law, then automatically that handicaps the powers that are being attributed to the ECOWAS and all these organizations and blocs. Because these blocs are being founded on mutual consent, on the principle of pacta sunt servanda. But now the issue is that for a pacta sunt servanda to be respected, it means that an agreement between parties are lost. You require that party to be to recognize the rule of law and to also put in place all mechanisms to be able to respect them. But now, if you have those who actually take over power, having no knowledge in law, having no respect for the rule of law or the constitution, it becomes then very difficult. That is why I think that the ECOWAS has to use a different approach, and I think that is what they are using. They are trying to use a comprehensive approach, which should not be that of violence, but which should be that of a peace agreement between the parties, and to be able to help the other parties understand that the rule of law is the only way that we can bring political stability in Africa. It will not be by the violation of the rule of law.
Okay, you cited the comprehensive. Yes, right on.
Yeah, so the bloc can also take other measures, maybe economic measures or sanctions against this population. But we have to also understand that at the end of the day, when these regional blocs take sanctions against these countries, the people who are in power are not those who are going to suffer, because you are not going to make them suffer. They have the money, they have the resources, they have the guns, and they are fine. The people who are going to suffer are the poor population, women and children who will lack basic commodities, who will lack resources for education, for health, and all the like. So at the end of the day, it's not a comprehensive method using maybe sanctions and the rest, especially in Africa. So I think that they are trying to go through negotiations and to help the others come on board and respect the rule of law.
Yeah, exactly. You said the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, they are putting in place measures, comprehensive measures, to see how they can tame the resurface of military coups in the region. Sometimes they even give sanctions. We have seen it in Guinea-Conakry, seen sanctions on Mali, and so forth. So now, how effective are these, or how effective is this measure put in place by the regional bloc when it comes to resolving this? Because they don't actually turn around the whole situation, but as you earlier said, it affects the people who really cannot afford, because it might end up in say it affecting the educational system, the economy, especially the poor people. So how effective are some of these measures, these stringent measures put in place by the regional bloc?
Well, as I earlier said, these measures are not very effective because they will just cause political constraint, but actually they are not strong enough to actually bring the leaders to conform to the rule of law and to the conventions or to the fact that have been taken by the bloc, by each of those member states. So it's a quite difficult situation because we have realized that despite the sanctions, things are not changing. We have to bear in mind here that those who are leading are not civilians. You know, when you take a sanction against a civilian leader, it is easy because the military might side with the population and they will be able to oust the civilian leader. But now, when you have a military leader in place, it becomes complicated. Because even through their training, they are used to difficult situations. You understand? They are used to harsh situations. They have the guns and they have all the resources in their power. So the economic sanctions, even though they will cause some political constraint, but they will not be enough to actually compel these military leaders to abide according to the rule of law. So that is where the issue is. And now, if you have the military fighting against the population, you see the populations are on the weaker side because they don't have arms and all the like. And you know, in Africa here, it's the military guys, they believe that they can deal with the population. So they always feel that they are superior, and if they have the weapons, then they can crush any manifestation. And that is why you realize that in Africa, except the military was for a particular coup, the coup will never ever take place. If it's just the population going out there to fight, it will never happen. So that is the issue. The leaders we are having here are military leaders, and I think the economic sanctions to compel them to work according to the rule of law. So that is why I just strongly believe that the best manner is a comprehensive approach to approach them and to tell them that, okay, look, there has been coup upon coup, and this is because this particular problem has not been resolved. You have not been working according to the rule of law, and that seems to be the problem, because if you look at all the coups, you realize that there are always violations of the rule of law, constitution, and all the like. So why should we not come back to the rule of law to assure political stability in the region? There is no, if you organize a coup, you take over power and you hand it back to a civilian, there is no problem in that. If the civilian does not do well, you tell him that move out. You take it, you give it to another civilian, or if you want to present yourself, you leave your profession as a military and you present yourself as a civilian. It's as simple as that. So if people take power and they just believe that by taking power they are going to stay there, that would be a problem, and that will actually cause political uncertainty and instability in the region. So I think the best manner to go about it is a comprehensive approach.
Yeah, that was a very powerful suggestion you made there. Just to wrap up today's edition on our topic of discussion, do you think there are any lessons that other African leaders can learn from what's happening in Burkina Faso, given that it was once termed the country of upright men?
Yeah, it is still termed the country of upright men, but unfortunately, we tend to realize that the name is not matching with practice. So what we can easily learn from this is that if we don't put in place good governance system in our different African countries and in Africa in general, then automatically we'll be prone to have a population that will never be satisfied. And when we talk about the population, yeah, we are not only talking about citizens, but we are also talking about the military, because the military they are part of the population. They also have rights, even though due to the fact of that they are military, they have a different type of status, but they are part of the population. So if we don't put in place good governance systems, we'll have people who will have grudges and who will always look for an opportunity to oust the ruling entity or authority in power, and at the end of the day we'll keep on having stability. So it's time for the African Union and all the different regional blocs to actually carry out campaigns, to actually carry out projects that will be aimed at putting in place good government alone will foster peace and stability in our different African regions, in our different African countries, and also in the continent. And if Africa is peaceful, then that is a factor for development, because in a peaceful environment, activities can go on, education can go on, people can have health, people can carry out their businesses, people can move from one place to another, and that actually fosters growth in Africa, increase our economy, and make life better for all Africans.
That was a very powerful conclusion there. I want to say thank you so much, Ms. Dr. ASONG KHUMBAH, for joining us on today's edition of Voice It.
Thank you, Sharon. It was a pleasure. I'm privileged.
It was a pleasure once again having you. Today we were discussing the military coup that took place in the West African country of Burkina Faso, and as guest this afternoon we had Dr. ASONG Michael KHUMBAH, who is a lawyer with the Rwandan Bar Association. Thank you so much for your input on today's topic of discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, if you were watching over 4U television or you listen to us over 4U radio, we have come to the end of today's edition of Voice It over your Pan-African channel 4U Media. I have been NJIX NABESEH for presentation. I want to thank the technical team for ensuring the smooth run of today's edition of Voice It. Do have a great day in company of our programs.